Hey, Mogul Fam, welcome back to Mogul Talk with Darcel Laurie, where success is just a byproduct of who we are. It's your girl, Darcel, your host, where every week I'll be bringing you a Mogul Minute of inspiration, new topics, and surprise guests. Stay tuned. Peace. It's time for another Mogul Minute. Can I get a drum roll, please? And today's Mogul Minute is health is wealth. Let me say that again. Health is wealth. The reason why I wanted to kind of mention that, I know it's a short phrase, a short quote, but really a powerful and impactful one. And a really meaningful one, because I think something that we don't focus on enough is our health. Not only our physical health, not only if, we're bleeding out or we have a broken leg or broken toe or arm, right? That's important too. And you have to address those things. Those are things that we can see, right? But also the importance of our mental health, our well-being, our whole person. Are we, if we're irritable, if we are really suffering from anxiety, if we are noticing that we're angry all the time, whatever that feeling of, something's off, we need to make sure that we're checking on our health, not just our physical health, but also our mental health. On today's episode, we're going to actually be talking about our mental health and the importance of therapy and treating those things that we can't really see. And I feel like the one thing that we cannot get back is our health, and when we think about all the trips we can plan, the money we can make, all those things, nothing means more in this world than time and your health. And without those two things, money doesn't really mean that much, right? If your health is not great. Taking those trips don't really mean that much if your health is not great. And so it's so important for us to invest in ourselves. The one person that you need to make sure that you ride or die for is you, that you invest in you. And if you don't invest in you, who's going to invest in you? And so make sure that you're taking care of your health, because health is wealth. And that was your Mogul Minute of Inspiration. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mogul Talk with Darcel Laurie. It's your girl Darcel, and I am super excited for this episode. We have a special guest in the studio, Raelea Webster. She is a licensed professional counselor, and I'm so honored to have you in the studio. We are going to be talking about mental health today and the importance of our mental health. So Raelea, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy and so grateful to be here. I'm excited.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. So one of the reasons why I felt like it was so important to have you on this podcast, and especially on this episode as we talk about mental health, I think coming off of the pandemic, we definitely saw a rise and an increase, or just more awareness around mental health, because we were in the house and a lot of issues were being stirred up and brought to the surface that maybe we kind of suppressed or pushed down. And I feel like now that we're in this day and age, 2024, coming out of that pandemic, a lot of people have gone to therapy, and which I'm so excited about.
Me too.
And I know in your profession, I know you're excited about it as well. But I think it's important, especially even for our Black and Brown community, to talk about mental health and the importance of mental health. Now, we have an array of different people who watch the podcast, but I feel like it used to be taboo, like to go to therapy.
Absolutely.
Like there's something wrong with me, or I got to keep it on the hush if I do have a therapist.
I'm not crazy. I don't need therapy.
Right. And so I just kind of want to get into that today. But before that, I'm so honored that, one, we met through church.
Yes.
And I'm so honored to be able to have you on. And so we can talk about Jesus all day. So that's the beautiful part. We were able to kind of mix the topic and talk about how we love the Lord and how faith also helps us with our mental health as well.
Absolutely.
But tell me why you got into the field that you decided to get into before we ask any more questions.
Yes. So I knew that I wanted to help people. I think that was the main goal. How did I want to help people was the question. I knew that I've always been a listener, observer, very analytical.
Yeah.
So I'm never really the first person to talk in the room, but the first person to listen. And I so much believe in making space for people to be heard. I want to hear their stories. And that's when I found that I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to give people that opportunity because I think it's so precious to do that. And on my end, it's such an honor to have someone who's never met me be able to sit in that space and be willing to share with me.
Yeah.
So I feel honored to be able to be a part of that. But along with that, actually, so growing up, I had experiences with anxiety and, of course, trying to navigate being an adolescent. So that, and along with my diagnosis with cancer back in 2016 when I turned 26, is actually what led me to want to specialize, now that I'm in remission, in chronic illness and chronic pain.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a way of being able to say, perhaps I went through this so that I could be able to take that walk with other people so that I can be able to better meet them where they're at.
Yeah. And it's interesting how life and our experiences really kind of form our path. I think I love that you mentioned, you just knew you wanted to help people.
Yes.
And one thing I will say about you, you're a great listener. You are definitely like sunshine when you walk into a room. And you don't have to be the loudest in the room to be sunshine. And I think that's kind of what drew me to you, is your light. And so I can see how your clients must feel so safe coming to you, because like you mentioned, it is an honor to be in your position to, for people to come to you and feel like when you're sitting with your therapist, you're sitting with someone who you're going to tell everything to, and you feel like you have to trust. And it's interesting how, God allows things to happen in our life that takes us to, like you said, you didn't know how you wanted to help, but as life started lifing, right? And
Exactly.
God really started to formulate that path for you.
Right.
And that's something, as my Mogul fam knows, I am an educator by day and I'm a podcaster by night, I like to say. And that's something that really is near and dear to my heart, is helping others really find their passion and their path. And that's the biggest thing that I say, is like, life is going to show you exactly who you need to be, where you need to be, what your passions are, what are the things that you're called to. And so going through that experience must have been really, really challenging to even get that diagnosis. How was that for you? And even just thinking about mental health, how was your mental health during that time?
Oh my goodness. So honestly, thinking back, I even look back now and I'm like, how did you get through that? So I can only think, but God, right, by his grace, because I literally think I was just in survival mode, which is, I think, how a lot of trauma works. You are just like, I can't worry about getting to the next day or the next week. I just need to figure out how I'm going to get to the next moment. Or for me, the next breath. Because it was often a state of constant pain. Like, there's literally never a time where you're not uncomfortable or not in pain. Doctors would even ask me, like, what's your pain level today? And I'm like, oh, it's normal. It's at an 8 or a 6. I'm like, because there is no like...
There's no one. There's no two, right?
I'm always in pain. Like, this is my normal day for me. So yeah, it was definitely, I was in survival mode of just trying to get through, but also a time where I think I got even closer to God. Where I was calling out to him more times, where even in spaces where I was alone or in the hospital. One thing with chemo is that you get insomnia, so you're just up at night. You've watched all the movies, you've gone on YouTube and Facebook as much as you can. So you're in this space where it's like, well, maybe I can try talking to God. So I think that's when I got closer to him, So, and it's interesting how our trials and tribulations bring us even closer to him. I think it's in those moments when there's nothing else that we're reminded that we have everything because we have him.
Yes. That speaks so deeply to me, because when our back is against the wall, I think in life we try so hard to be in control.
Yes.
And then God puts us in these out of our control moments,
Absolutely,
or seasons of our life, where we have to fully depend on him. And praise God that you made it to the other side. I know that that is giving so many of our listeners hope who either have the diagnosis now, or are in remission, or are waiting for the test results.
Absolutely.
And so I know that if you can make it through, that's gonna really bless somebody else, that they can make it through too.
Absolutely.
And especially with God.
Yes.
And I'm with you that when I think about the hardest seasons of my life, I don't know how I would have made it through if it wasn't like knowing that I had an anchor.
Yes.
Knowing that I had a source that has plans for me, plans to prosper me and not to harm me, plans to give me a hope and a future. And I'm like, God, I know you're not done. This can't be it, right? Like, your plans for me, I know what you've spoken over my life. And I know that he has such a great calling on your life, and which led you to where you are now. So praise God for that. Now, did you ever go to therapy prior to the diagnosis or during the diagnosis, or did you wait till after the diagnosis to start going?
Yeah, so prior to, I'd been in therapy, but definitely for other things, mainly related to anxiety, or just honestly, like you said, just managing a very busy lifestyle.
Yeah.
At the time, I had 2 part-time jobs. I was like last month of grad school, I had practicum, so I was just like
busy.
I was busy. I was on the treadmill of life, and I thought, I just got to keep in control of everything. So you're right. It definitely was a break from that control. But yes, I saw a therapist prior. During treatment, I didn't. Honestly, I think, like I said, I was just in survivor mode of just to get through day to day.
Yeah.
And it honestly felt like, and I think this happens with a lot of traumas, that you don't almost realize what you're going through until afterwards.
Yeah.
So once the storm has started to settle a little bit, and maybe it's not torrential downpouring, but it's like drizzling, you're like, oh wait, I really just had cancer. Like, I really almost just lost my life now that I'm not focusing on the pain as much.
Yeah.
And that was when I was like, I need something. I need someone to help me figure out this new, quote unquote, new normal, this new life, because I'm a whole different person. One thing that I found, that it was hard to find someone who specialized in cancer patients or chronic illness. Thankfully, the therapist I had was just very understanding. I believe they had a chronic illness as well, so they were able to meet me in the middle on that. But that's what made me realize, like, hey, I want to be able to be that person for other people. Who specializes in it, who's walked that similar walk.
Yeah, I definitely think that those who specialize in certain things, it definitely makes a difference.
Yes.
Because sometimes when you're, and not saying no shade to any other therapist, it's like when someone has been through a similar situation, not an identical, but a similar situation, and you don't have to really explain as much as somebody who has never experienced what you've experienced, and you have to explain. It's really challenging. I know for myself, going through a divorce, it's so much easier when you're around people who just get it and been there.
Yes, it is.
And then to people who don't get it, it's a lot. I wouldn't say it's harder, but I remember having a therapist who, when I started going to therapy as an adult, due to the circumstance I was in, that's when I was like, all right, I have to really find someone who can actually talk the talk that I was experiencing. And so with that being said, praise God for God directing you in that way.
Yes.
Now, when you think about, okay, now you know your purpose, now you know your calling, have you seen, like, a spike in certain things when it comes to mental health? Do you feel like there's a trend that's going on right now in mental health?
Yes, I do. So one of the biggest things that you mentioned, right, with the pandemic was when that happened, we had to figure something else out because we couldn't meet in person anymore. So, telehealth just went huge.
Oh, yeah.
For everyone. And a lot of places, some places, especially if it's, community based, have maybe had to switch back to full on in person. But a lot of places are either hybrid or similar to the private practice I work with, or solely remote.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's been a huge help for clients. So clients, it's more convenient for them. They're able to even meet, say, on their lunch break.
Yeah.
Whereas before they may have had to take the day off or work half a day to be able to meet that therapy session. And then, for instance, say someone is in the same state as their therapist, but their therapist may live like 2 or 3 hours away from them, right, from where their office is. So had it been in person, it might not be possible. But now they can still meet over a secure, HIPAA compliant platform, even if they are distance away, because maybe it's hard to find that specialized therapist or one who's even the same ethnicity as you, but they have that option now. So in that way, I think, I think everyone has their different opinions about it, but I think in that way it's become a blessing for a lot of people.
Oh my gosh. I thank God for telehealth. Because when I first started seeing a therapist, it was definitely through telehealth, and she was in a completely different state. And it was really nice. Like you said, when you go through the different apps and different platforms to try to find a therapist. I know that I used, I forget what the app was called, but being able to find someone who looks like me, someone who, the same gender as me. Not that it necessarily mattered, but I felt like those things, and you were able to see like their profiles, like what were some of their core beliefs or things like that. And I felt like, okay, I want to be able to talk to someone who kind of believes something similar that I believe, has some similar core values, or has certain levels of experience. So that really helped me like kind of hone in on my therapist. Another thing I want to say is I'm a really big advocate, and I don't know how you feel about this, but you need to date around to find the right therapist.
That absolutely.
For you.
They have to,
Because sometimes I'll see the profile and I'm like, okay, well, this person sounds like it, but they may not be. Once you start meeting with them, they may not be a match. How do you feel about that?
I definitely agree with that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that people don't know that they can do that, that you can get a therapist that looks like you, that maybe has had the same background experience from you. Maybe they're, born in the same area, maybe the same, experiences of whatever stressor that you're going through, age, gender. Absolutely. Shop around for what works best for you. I think people in the past have kind of thought like, well, I just have to go with this one person.
Right.
Like, you can look around. It comes to the point where even if that therapist doesn't take your insurance, there's a way, sliding scale where they can work with you based on, what you're able to afford. So absolutely date around. There's so many options, so many websites, different things where you can look for Psychology Today, therapy for Black girls. So many options.
That's so good. Thank you for those resources, by the way. But that's so important, because I think another thing that kind of pushes people away from therapy is like, well, what if, I had this bad experience with a therapist, or, that therapist really didn't understand me or didn't get me. They didn't seem like they really cared. I want to really urge our, listeners is please try again until you find the right one that is the match for you. It's almost like dating. You gotta go on a bunch of dates, kiss a couple frogs until you find
the one.
your prince, right? So you kind of have to keep going. And that's so important.
Your therapist is out there. Just keep looking, and I think and don't back down on what works best for you, because that's going to affect how well the therapy goes and how much you benefit, is if you're with someone that you feel comfortable, that you can build a rapport with and connect with.
Now one question I want to ask you is So I've been reading, I don't know if you read this book before, so this is not in the notes, but
Okay.
but we just started a book club, me and my friends, and we're reading the book that's called The Body Keeps Score.
Okay.
Have you read that one?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read that one.
So it just kind of leads into my question is, when is a good time to go to therapy? Because I don't know if people always know.
Yes.
Sometimes, like you said, you had 2 jobs, you were going to grad school, you had your practicum. Sometimes we feel like that's it's a normal that we adjust to, but there's things that could be happening as what the body is telling you, but you brush it off, you push it to the back burner, and sometimes you don't realize, oh, there's something deeper
There's something wrong. Yeah.
Right.
And your body will tell you.
And your body will tell you. And so many people, and when it comes to mental health, I'm going to let you answer, but so many people, when it comes to mental health, it's like, it's kind of one of those things that I feel like gets ignored because if you're not bleeding out, if you don't have a broken leg, it's like, oh, okay, I'm fine.
It must be all right.
I'm fine. I'm good.
And no bones are exposed.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, but for generations in your family, you guys have been dealing with this same issue.
Right.
Something's wrong. Not that something's wrong, necessarily something can't be fixed or can't be addressed. I'm a firm believer in breaking generational curses, but we have to know what we're breaking, right?
Right.
And so I think being able to dig deeper in those therapy sessions is what's going to help you. But like, how can people know, oh, maybe I should see a therapist?
I think so. Anytime you are dealing with something that is, majorly affecting you and you just need support on. And people, I think, don't realize, like, you can come to therapy for so many different things. Right. So we don't have to wait to a point where things have gotten so bad or, it's affecting my sleep now or having trouble eating. It's affecting my job, my relationships.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait to then. There's not like a 3-step process where it's like, if you haven't made it through this, now it's time for therapy.
Right.
You can go anytime. You can go when you just got married, when you got divorced, whether you had a child, lost a child, whether you've moved across maybe the country, lost a job, just got a new job. So many different things that could affect your life. And there's such a change for us that we may not realize. And it could be a good time to be able to process those things. So, yeah, anytime, I think.
Anytime is a good time to go to therapy.
To be honest.
I also see it like as like a maintenance check. Like sometimes it's like an oil change, right?
Absolutely,
it doesn't mean anything necessarily is wrong with your car. It just may need a little quick oil change, a little check-in, a little tune-up, and you're good to go. I feel like as long as, and sometimes people say, well, I have my friends. I don't need to talk to a therapist. I have my friends.
Right.
How do you feel about that statement?
So I will say, if a person says, I don't really need therapy, like, that's your decision.
Right.
Because when it comes down, I think the first thing, if you want to do therapy, it definitely should be your decision.
Right.
You want to come to therapy with things that you want to work on, because if it's not something that you want to do, it won't really work.
That's so
about the person, right? And friends are a great resource, right? That we could talk to, depend on, get support from. The thing that I think is missed, though, right, is so with therapy, which we might not get from our friends, so it's not just venting, not just talking. So we're looking at using psychological assessments to track progress. We're brainstorming goals with clients to help direct our treatment. We're identifying interventions and coping skills that we intertwine into the progress to help that client succeed. And you're learning these skills and being able to take them out in your everyday life. So that way, ultimately, you're like, hey, I appreciate this. I don't really need therapy anymore. And I can kind of fly on my own, And of course, that looks different, for everyone, what that time looks like. But that's not usually something, that our friends can be able, to provide for us. But you can have therapy and friends, or maybe you feel like, my friends, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's completely fine.
Yeah. I definitely feel like the collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need a support system. And absolutely. I feel like any great, if you look at the athletes, right? Or like, I don't know, famous leaders, right?
Yes, yeah.
They do not just have their friends.
Yep. You got a
They
whole
have
team.
mentors.
Right.
They have a publicist.
Yes.
They have someone doing marketing. They have a squad
Mm-hmm.
that
Yes.
makes them look great.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Same thing for our athletes. They have someone who's doing occupational therapy, someone who's doing therapy, someone who's handling their finances. They have a support system.
So true. Yes.
How do we think we can go through life? If some of the most successful people
Yes.
that we know, how do we think we can go through life and
Right.
be successful? And success looks different for everybody. You don't have to be an athlete, but you can be a teacher. You can be, a babysitter. You can, and you may need to learn how to manage, that. So it's like, I think it's so, so important for us to have a squad and have a team.
Yes.
And someone who has resources, someone who has, like you said, different skills and skill sets to be able to impart to me.
Yes.
A lot of times our friends, we're great listeners if you have really great friends, but we may not have necessarily the skill set to be able to give you, okay, here's some next steps on what you can do.
Exactly.
Here are some tools. That's why you need a specialist.
Absolutely.
And you can have, like I believe in having a team for different things, having maybe a therapist for, maybe it's a tough time, a tough season in your life. Then you may have a mentor. Then you may have friends. You may have your mama. You may have your dad, whoever it is. But having a squad, I think, is so important for success.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. Different people for different things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You might have the friend who just tells you like it is, and you're like, I need
Everyone
that.
needs those.
Right? And then you're like, and then I have this other friend who just, helps me cope. And then I have my therapist helps me process trauma.
Yeah.
We're going full circle here.
And then you'll see that your life is a little bit healthier.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes, too, it's important for people who maybe don't know you as well as a friend to see some of your blind spots.
Yes.
Because sometimes people who also have known you so long, sometimes they know certain things about you, but it kind of goes by the wayside.
Right.
But someone who has a fresh eye
Absolutely
can see something like, oh, this is from this. And we don't share everything with our friends.
So true. So true.
Having that safe space, like, okay, because sometimes you may want to tell your friends certain things, but like, I'm not going to go into detail. I don't want them to judge me.
Right.
But the good thing is with a therapist, I can go in, share what I need to share. It's confidential, and I leave.
You leave it there.
I can share the worst thing ever, worst experience or most embarrassing experience, and it's a safe space, and you can actually get it out.
Yes, that's
and
amazing.
I think something that is so important and such a healing thing for most people is just getting it out.
Absolutely.
I will say when it comes to therapy and my experience with therapy, it felt so good just to be able to have a space, like having my friends, having my mom. That was good when I was going through a tough season.
Right.
But having a therapist that just can sit with me, cry with me, process with me, that really, really helped me. I think also therapists are great for giving language to what you're experiencing. I think, for myself, I never experienced anxiety until I was going through the process of divorce. And I'm like, oh, what is this thing that I'm feeling? And, my heart is racing, or I can't breathe, or all those different types of things. And it was like almost like debilitating, like I couldn't function. And so having someone to be able to say, this is what you're experiencing, So I think that's important too. So can you speak to maybe those aha moments that you have in those therapy sessions with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're absolutely right. So being able to put a name to certain symptoms or feelings can really make a person feel like, oh, wait, so it's not just all in my head, right? Or people, unfortunately, are using that negative word of like crazy. I thought, something was like so wrong with me. And it's like, no, people do have this experience. And one thing I like to say is like, so many people have experienced this that they came up with a word and a name for it, right? So you know that you're not alone. And also, here's the steps of how we deal with it. So now it gives the power back to the client, back to the person. And that's really what therapy, should be about, right? About empowering you. We can't control everything that happens to us, right? And there's a quote that I like that says like, peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's having that peace in the middle of chaos. So that's what we try to bring back.
Come on, bars.
Right. Right. So
I love
being
that.
able to, focus on what you can control. So if all I can control in my moment, in this moment, is my breathing, that is so much. And now I have a way of managing.
Yeah. That is so, so good, having the peace in the midst of chaos. And I think, honestly, that's what therapy was for me.
So good.
Because, and I think, like you said, any good therapist, and you may have to shop around for a good therapist, just like any job, but I think I remember, and I'm still in therapy, but I remember just being so excited that it was therapy day.
Yeah,
Counting down, like, oh my gosh, my session's about to come up.
Right.
Like, because I felt like I was about to talk to my bestie. Even though we weren't besties, but it felt like someone who understood me, someone I could just dump, my feelings, my thoughts, all of the crazy things that's going on in my head, of being able to share it. And I think sometimes we forget that when we unload so much on our family and our friends, that could take a toll on them.
Also true.
So having that safe space, and even, I know even coming from a Christian background, a lot of times people just go to their pastors.
Right.
And I'm not saying spiritual counsel isn't great, because I had spiritual counsel, I had friends, I had my mama, I had my brothers,
resources.
I had all the resources, but I also had a therapist, because I think there's something important, especially for our Christians, because sometimes even Christians are like, oh, I'll just talk to my pastor, or I'll just talk to the deacon. And I'm like, but they're not licensed.
Also true.
And they don't have the language. They can pray with you.
Absolutely.
And it's not like, and they can speak from their own personal experiences and things of that nature, but it's so important, even in the faith community.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times we say we can pray something away. And I'm a firm believer that if it wasn't for the power of prayer, I don't know where I would be. But there were times that I needed the practical tools on when I have an anxiety attack, what to do. And that deep breathing really helped me to center, to focus. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough, is like, yes, the power of prayer. And I always say, pray first. For anything, pray. But there are some practical tools and steps that therapy can give you. And I think Christians need to also know that too. How do you feel about that, especially within the Christian community?
I certainly agree. So whenever I think about that, and I probably need to get this shirt because I've seen it on Facebook and other places that says I can have therapy in Jesus too.
Yes,
right.
Jesus and therapy.
That is so true. Because I think therapy can be such a blessing. Sometimes I think God puts us in these places where it's like, I can't just make this go away. That is the hope, is that, okay, I'll pray and that he will just take this away. But sometimes we actually need to deal with what's in front of us. And what if that's the lesson, right, of dealing with it? And what a blessing that is to have someone who is willing to sit with us in a non-judgmental place and help us unpack the things that may be messy or dirty or frightening or terrifying, that we're able to work through that. And I think that's sometimes what we have to do, work in the middle of the storm. Because eventually the storm will pass, but then another storm will come, right? And we have to learn how to be able to adapt and how to manage. And I think, in a lot of ways, our faith teaches us that. Again, how do I find peace in this chaos? I need to figure out where this chaos is coming from. Like, what is this?
Yes. And I think that God is, like you said, he's given us all gifts.
Yes.
And he's given us all talents. And when we think about the story of the talents, right? And how, I think it was two of the boys, correct me if I'm wrong, that, took those talents and they multiplied it. And then it was one of the guys who had the one talent and he just buried it. Right. Then it was like, when the guy came back and was like, well, what did you do with your talents? And he was basically like, oh, I just buried it. And that's so important for us. It's not to bury our talents and our gifts, but to lean into each other's gifts and talents. And that is so crucial and so key. And I think it's not spoken about enough sometimes in the faith community, because sometimes it's like, oh, just come up for prayer. And I want you to come up for prayer. I want you to pray this thing out. But I also want you to get the practical tools that's going to help you through those situations. So I'm a firm believer, Jesus and therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, I think there's a scripture in the New Testament that talks about, each one of you use your gifts.
Yes.
So if prayer is your gift, if being able to help people in this way or that way is your gift. And I think, so part of it is that, we go to school and we learn these therapy techniques, but then this larger part of it is like, how do I connect with my client? How do I provide that empathy that has to be natural? Because you can't learn. There's only so much you can learn. And the other part you just really have to have in you, almost like a gift. And I do believe there's a gift that God gave me. So Jesus and therapy.
Jesus and therapy. Y'all hear that? Jesus and therapy. That is so true. And I feel like when I was talking to you about the Body Keeps Score, the book, and that's what I'm currently reading right now. And it's not a sponsor of the podcast or anything, but I think it's a good read. When we talked about like reasons why to come to therapy, I think it's important to, even if there's nothing wrong, just coming just to say, hey, these are some of my life experiences. Is there anything that you see that I don't see?
Right.
Sometimes we're like, okay, my money is right. I have my husband, or I have my wife, or I have my kids, or I have my house, or I have whatever this checklist that people have in their brain is. Well, I have everything on my checklist, but sometimes we may not notice those things that we just label as our personality. I'm just a short fused person. That's my personality.
Right.
No, there's something deeper there. Or I have a problem just speaking to people, and we think that's just our personality. Maybe there's some trauma there, and that kind of is holding you back from owning the space that you're in.
Absolutely.
And so I think there's always ways to grow and to develop. And I think so many times, when we think about even professional, like I said, leaders and people who are very successful, they are always working on their personal development. There's never a time that they're not working on their personal development and growth. And I think that sometimes we can get to a place in our lives that we're just like, this is just how my life is. This is just the way it is. And I'm like, well, how can we grow? How can we become better? And I think one of the things that is so important and crucial to me is those moments of like when we just started on a new year. So having those vision board parties and what do we want our life to look like, and what do we want the success of our life to look like, and really partnering with God on that. But we don't ever talk about what do we want our mental health to look like as we enter this new year. And one thing that God has really been speaking to me about is, Darcel, all these goals are really great, but what are the habits that you're going to change in order to make these things great?
Right.
Because in order to be successful, your habits have to change.
Right.
If you continue to do the same thing and doing it repeatedly, right? You're just, what do they say? They call that insanity, right? And so it's like, no, you have to change as if you want this goal of being this public speaker or being the #1 podcast. What are some things that you're going to probably have to commit to? Or what are some things that you're going to have to cut out of your life? And I think sometimes people don't attach mental health and habits to that. And I think that's so important. So can you speak a little to like how sometimes it's not necessarily these big changes. It's just identifying what are some tweaks that we can make.
Absolutely. I always believe in with goals, we can start small. Right. It doesn't have to be huge. Even when it comes to something like working out, like, well, I'm going to work out every day.
Girl. I'm still trying to get my goal together with that.
This time I'm going to stretch every morning. I said, like, okay, how about if we just stretch for 5 minutes one day a week? And somebody might say, well, that's so small. Like, okay, it's so small. Like, then maybe we could start there. Something like so easy. And then we can build from that. That doesn't have to be huge. And I think it's amazing, definitely, to have goals. But making sure that there's literally time for you to breathe.
Oh, that's
because
good.
In order to do all these things, your cup is going to have at least some water in it, even if we're talking halfway. Right? So we're going to get burnt out pretty quickly if we don't have something. So where is my space in here to breathe? Where is my space in here to just self-care. And self-care doesn't always have to be a bubble bath, although that is amazing. That it can be just, I need some alone time.
Yeah.
I need to kind of step away from, people for a little bit. I need to maybe sleep in this day, whatever it is, just making sure you have those moments for yourself. I say it's a marathon, not a sprint. Right?
Yes.
So we are like taking our way. We're doing our warm-ups. We're doing our cool downs.
Yes.
All for our mental health, to be able to meet all these goals that we want to accomplish.
Absolutely. And I love that the gift of therapy is that you have somebody who's your personal accountability.
Yes.
So I love that at the top of every therapy session, it's like, so what did we talk about last time? What was your homework?
Right.
How did you make out with that homework? And being able to have someone hold you accountable so you can reach those goals, like you said. And those small little changes, those small little goals turn into, when you look behind you, you're like, oh, I've ran 2 miles.
Right.
I didn't know that. Or I ran 5 miles now.
Exactly.
But it's sometimes we're just doing the thing and we don't realize how much progress we're making.
We don't.
When we come consistently to therapy and we really allow and actually do the work.
Yes.
So I think that's important too, is when you're thinking about therapy, yes, it's great to just kind of vent and kind of dump. And also communicate, what do you want,
Absolutely.
the goal out of this therapy session.
Yes.
But also I love a great therapist that gives homework, right? That says, hey, next time I want to hear X, Y, and Z is done, right? And really being honest with where you are. I think if you're going to go to therapy, you need to be able to be in a position, in a place where you're being honest.
Absolutely.
Because God can only change who you are and not who you pretend to be.
Right.
So if you're pretending, the therapist is not going to know. They're just meeting you, right? And they're just developing this relationship with you.
Right.
But if you really are being the raw and real, uncut, taking off the mask and allowing God to use the therapist to address those things that may be a little dirty, a little muddy, as you mentioned earlier, and really allowing God to do the inner workings of that, I think is so key and so crucial. And I feel like that's where you get the most, benefit, is when you're honest.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens. That's where the real work starts, right? When we get to the point. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so kind of lastly, as we kind of wrap up this episode, when I think about therapy and I think about mental health and I think about, especially our Black and Brown community, I think more of us are going to therapy, which is like, yay us.
Yes.
Is there any message that you would love to get somebody who is either thinking about therapy or maybe on the fence of like, man, I've had some bad experiences. I don't know if I want to try therapy again. Any words of encouragement that you can give to someone?
So 2 things. So first, I definitely say, definitely try again. If it's, I would say, even though maybe if it, wasn't me personally, hope it wasn't me personally, but if you've had bad experiences, I apologize in advance for those, those experiences, because hopefully no one would have to go through that, but it does happen. So don't give up. I think definitely give it another try, because your therapist is out there. It just takes some tweaking and some looking, and don't hesitate to tell a therapist, you're working with, of like, hey, this I don't like this too much. This doesn't vibe well to my culture. Because we want to hear that. We want to know, what works and doesn't work, to better serve you. Because that's what this is about. This is about you and about helping you. It's not there about us or what makes us look good. It's about what works for you, whatever that might be. And I think also one thing I would leave is, remember that mental health is just as important as physical health, any other type of health, right? So one thing that I major take away from the grad school I went to, a Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, that really honed in about treating the whole person.
Yes.
So I like to tell people, treat your whole person, physically, mentally, spiritually, the whole thing. So when you're thinking about taking care of you, how can I treat my whole person? Don't leave out mental health and I'll be like, I'll just work my way through it, or maybe will my way through it and make it disappear. It's just as important as any other part of your body. So then treat your mind well, treat you well.
Absolutely.
We all deserve that.
Absolutely. I love how you mentioned owning the session. Can you give some tips on that? Because I think even for myself, I can be like, oh, I don't want to correct the treatment that I'm getting because I feel like, man, will this therapist feel offended?
Right.
If I say, hey, I like it better when this X, Y, and Z happens, or I like it better when I get more homework, or I like for us to go a little deeper, or maybe we can go at a faster pace, you know.
Right.
How do you feel about that as a therapist personally? If one of your clients is like, hey, I'd rather this style or this method. How does that make you feel? Can you speak for therapists on that? And then how can someone advocate for themselves in a session?
Absolutely. I love it personally. I appreciate it because then if the person's able to say that to me, then I'm seeing like maybe that their comfort level is changing. Like I want you to feel comfortable to be able to say like, I appreciate more homework, or like, you know, if you're like, hey, I tried that guided meditation, it's not my thing. I'm like, all right, cool, no problem.
Okay.
Let's switch it over. Let's try something that works for you. If listening to, you know, your favorite song is something that helps put you in the present moment, like absolutely. I want it to be a collaboration of us meeting your goal. So it's not just for me because it's not my goal, it's your goal.
Right.
So I'm here to help like be a little bit of a GPS and help you navigate and work through some of the obstacles we come across. But this is about what works best for you. And I'm always open to that. There's a post that says something along the lines of like, I said, therapy is great. We might process trauma today and we might talk about cake recipes next week.
Right.
And we can.
Yeah.
We can. If you want to talk about a movie that you saw and, you know, how that spoke to you and they were just a way of building rapport and that makes you feel comfortable to get to, you know, whatever you want to process or talk about, we can take that walk together.
Okay.
So absolutely. And just, I think for audience, just know that is an option. That is a way. It does not have to be super duper structured.
I think a lot of times, sometimes we may not be enjoying our sessions because we're not advocating for ourselves.
Right.
Because we're like, oh, I don't want to tell them they're not doing it right. Or and like you said, every person is different. And they have to customize the treatment that fits your personality. And if you don't speak up, how will they ever know that is not your thing?
That is the best way. Yes.
And so I definitely feel like our listeners should definitely take that as a takeaway. One, anytime is a good time to go to therapy. Two, you may have to date around to get the right therapist and find the right therapist that matches you. But also three, advocate for your own treatment.
Yes. And if for whatever reason, like, you do get pushback about, you know, how you wanting a certain thing. You know, I think some things like you might ask like, oh, I feel like this is taking too long or, you know, and therapists might explain, hopefully, like, this is a process. This will take some time. But certain things, if you're advocating for yourself and they aren't being met in therapy, then maybe it's time for a new therapist. Again, like shop around, like that is okay. If you have to shop around a bit, it's about doing what's the best fit for you.
Yeah. And you want to, I mean, for some of us, you're doing out-of-pocket costs for therapy or your insurance. So you're paying for it. So you want to get...
deserve the treatment.
You deserve to get what you're paying for. And I know that... And also going off of recommendations. Maybe you have friends who are like, hey, I love my therapist. And then maybe seeing, okay, let me maybe try your therapist. I know that's something that I did as well. When I got my second therapist. And it was just off of a recommendation, you know? And so I think it's so important to ask around, ask for recommendations, ask, you know, like advocate for your sessions. But also, like you said, if you're not getting what, you know, you really feel that you're supposed to get, then that's okay too, and shop around. And sometimes I guess it can feel defeating. Like, oh man, do I want to tell somebody my whole story all over again?
Of course.
But I think it's so worth it. Like you are worth the investment. If you're going to invest in anything, we invest in cars, we invest in houses, we invest in dating, we invest in so many things, in our children or whatnot. But the one thing you should invest in that should be at the high top of your priority list, other than Jesus, is yourself.
Absolutely.
And if you don't invest in you, who is?
So true.
If you're not going to take 100%. Care of you, who do you expect? What are you waiting around for? And you're going to fall to the wayside. You're going to see your mental health kind of deteriorate right before your own eyes. That short temper, you think it's just your short temper. You think it's no, it's really bad because you're really at your wit's end and you really need to process some things. That people pleaser mentality, you say yes to everybody and you have no boundaries and you end up in a bad relationship after bad relationship because you have no boundaries. There's something behind that. It's not just your personality or and I want people to really understand that sometimes it's harder to see mental health because it's so normalized on like our habits or culture or social media with this whole soft life. And I'm like, marriage is not a soft life. It's a really an investment. But it's like, when I think about just so many things, that all the different messaging that is going on around, I think we have to get more clear messaging when we get to go to a therapist.
It's okay to take care of yourself. It's important to take care of yourself, and I think that's part of what therapy is, right? We're not waiting till the last possible minute or now everything's really terrible.
Oh my gosh, don't wait till that house is completely on fire. You smell smoke, then that means fire is approaching. So please do not wait for you to be burnt out. And even I think especially like for moms, becoming a new mom or becoming a mom of two versus a mom of one.
Absolutely.
That is a whole different life change. So life changes are great times to come to therapy. Just to say, how do I balance all this? Or I feel like I'm going cray cray. And it's okay to feel like it's okay to not be okay. As long as you're seeking the help to get the tools to become okay. So this was like so awesome. I love this conversation.
Me too.
Is there any resources that you want to give our Mogul fam, or any way that they can find you?
Yes. Okay. So I have a couple resources.
Okay, go ahead.
I think one especially is so if you're in a place where maybe you can, find a therapist, sometimes there's wait lists. I encourage you just, be patient or search in other places to find that therapist that you're looking for. But also if you're in a place where you're like, I need something now, you're, at risk for wanting to end your life or harm yourself in some way, there is a nationwide 24/7 line, the crisis line. It's a lot easier to remember than the longer number. It's 988. So you can call that number and someone can come out to you. They can assess the situation so you don't have to do this alone. So even if it's just, you just need to talk some things through. So it's not therapy, but it is immediate service in that way. Also, Psychology Today is a really big one. You can be able to find specifiers, so what ethnicity you want, what you want them to specify in, the age, how many years they've been in the field, location, insurances, all of that is there. If you're looking for African-American therapists or female therapists, Therapy for Black Girls is a great one. I'm actually on both, so you can check around. And you can also check out the way to follow me. So the private practice that I work with called Ever Upward Counseling has its own Instagram page. So you can follow that there. A lot of great resources. And if you're looking for therapy, you can check out our website, everupwardcounseling.net. and see if maybe your skill set meets what you're looking for.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely be putting all that information in the show notes. I know one that's been kind of passing through social media is BetterHelp. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, so that's definitely an option. I think seeing if I'm not 100% sure how that works as far as with insurance, to see I think it's out of pocket. So that's another option too. So seeing that if you can pay out of pocket, if it's something that you can afford. But yeah, it could be something worth, trying out. Yeah, it could be.
We're going to put all these resources because we want you guys to go to therapy, find the therapist for you. And then, of course, in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to share the platform that you found your therapist on.
Absolutely.
So, I feel like if we can share resources, that's always a better way for us to kind of help one another. It was such a pleasure having you, Raelea. You were such a beautiful light and sunshine. And I feel like our Mogul fam really got a lot from this episode and feeling seen. I hope that you guys feel seen
so too.
And feel heard and also know that you're not crazy if you go to therapy.
Nope. It means you're human.
It's normal. Yes, it means you're human.
Yes.
And so Thank you so much. And I can't wait to
you.
have you on another episode in the future. So,
I love that.
yes. And shout out to all my Mogul fam for tuning in and watching.
Yes.
We are so excited to just have you guys talk about something that's so important, mental health. Please keep the conversation going. I hope that we generated this conversation and started it for you to only now have this, maybe this around the table with your family at dinner. Maybe this is a conversation that you can keep going. And so remember to invest in yourself, because if you don't invest in you, who is? And you are are worth the investment. So make sure that you invest in your mental health. And until next time, make sure you subscribe, make sure you tune in and subscribe on all platforms. And until then, see ya. Hey, Mogul fam, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mogul Talk with Darcel Laurie. And a special thank you to our guest, Raelea, for being a part of this episode. And of course, Mogul fam, I'm always going to shout you out. And make sure you subscribe and tune into the next episode. Peace.